As you can say, at the ISRM, we are inclusive and we are agile and we're adaptable. We say if you turn up, come on and enjoy come and join our table, come and have a chat. So we basically opened it up. We've now also got Javeria Malik on board, who is a senior security and risk manager at Action Aid and is chair of the INSSA, International NGO Safety and Security Association. We have Alexandra Hoffmann, who is an old friend of the ISRM and has been on multiple of our women in security, diversity, equality, etc., etc. An interesting conversation. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around and set the scene. We have one person who's not in the room. We have not on the panel. Danyetta, Miranda, if you'd like to come and join us, just let me know. We'd be delighted to bring you in and sort of open up your camera and get you in on the conversation. That's basically everybody around the table. So let's start off with, okay, where are we? It's now 20th of April, 2022. One question we can ask is, why the hell are we still discussing this? Why in 2022 are we still having this damn discussion? Didn't we win this one 30 years ago? We had the fair pay thing. We've had all sorts of revolutions. We're supposed to be modern, forward-looking. We're supposed to realize that if you don't have inclusivity and diversity, you're cutting yourself off from a huge part of the talent pool. Why are we having this discussion in 2022? Because, of course, we do need to have that. Let's start off with, who should we bring in? Let's start off with, I'm going to bring you in, Alexandra. Let's start off with you to set the tone, and then we'll go around the table. So, Alexandra, why are we having this conversation in 2022? Remind me.
Wow. Seriously. Now that I'm,
you see, the last bit was a friendly bit. Now the last bit was a friendly bit. Now we've gone professional. Now
No. I'm. This is a big question, and I've actually been questioning and wondering the very same for a couple of years now, and I'm going to bring it to this again. Sorry about this, guys, but it goes back to me becoming a mom 5 years ago. It's pretty much changed everything in my brain. So I think I would see it as us being all responsible for this. When I say all, is also us as women. I know I made a decision to change my way of living. I made a decision to adjust, and I'm working really hard. But the thing is, I because I own my business. I don't know if everyone knows me. Yes, I think everyone knows me here. But it's on my time. I decide precisely when I work. Of course, I also report to clients, right? But the bottom line is I create my own agenda. When you work for an organization, which is not yours, it's a very different ballgame. So going back to your question, I think it's all of us are responsible for it. And I don't want us as women to dismiss the fact that we are responsible, because I think I've come to the conclusion that I'm just not a man, that my brain is wired differently from even my husband when he became a father himself. He loves his children very, very much, but he can disconnect from them much easier than I can. It's just a fact. So maybe not all women are like this. Maybe not all fathers are like this as well, right? But I've seen this a lot around me since I've become a mom. So that just might be the answer, just genetics and just the way we've been created by nature, I would say, right? Our brains are just very, very different. And and of course, obviously, I don't want to dismiss the fact that talking about diversity is it's not only about being a man or a woman. It includes lots of different topics. But if we just want to focus on gender, I'm thinking, and some might really disagree with what I'm saying that I think nature is just responsible for it, really, and that's my take. And seriously, I'm thinking out loud right now because I don't have a straight answer to that, right?
The ISRM is open, inclusive. Our mission statement says that we believe that our mission is to create a platform and a space where academics, practitioners, and policymakers can come together to have a grown-up conversation about issues that are important. this is that grown-up conversation. And what's interesting is that you say that not everybody would agree with you, but the idea of that you are biologically different and therefore programmed, some people even try and criminalize you for saying that. Those are very, very sensitive statements. And if you can't say it on this platform, then where can you say it? So feel free to have those. And thank you for that, Alexandra. And I could feel that you were exploring your way through some feelings there, which are very powerful. Nathan, Chung, you, of course, we tend to think of diversity as potentially gender, sex, or race. You are a champion for neurodiversity. You're also a very active champion for women in cyber world. Maybe bringing slightly different perspective to it. You've been, of course, a senior operator both at EY and at Microsoft. So you've operated in those very high stress environments where one delivers or one dies, basically. What are your thoughts on the conversation so far?
It's interesting, and I do believe that the women's security movement, there has been shifts and changes as everyone can see in the news. The world is changing, like COVID-19, the war in Ukraine, the political unrest in the U.S. but in other countries. Also for women's security, it's changing a lot. Like, for example, I've seen many of my friends who were in women's security in the past year. Some of them are no longer in the spotlight as these priorities have changed their priorities, so to speak. But our goal, the need for us to be allies, it is definitely still there. It's still definitely valid. And sadly, like, for example, like with COVID-19 hit, the global economy was hit hard. Many women globally have left the workforce, and only now they're coming back in droves, but with, I would say, significantly more power, because now we have the ability to work from home. So that has enabled and empowered women to rejoin the workforce with a lot more flexibility than they had in the past. So I think there's been gains there.
There have been some gains, and we'll come to, and that's good. And of course, working from home has become a game changer, an absolute game changer. Of course, working from home, another way you can say working from home is sleeping at the office. I mean, and I imagine that for many, many people, that crossover has been incredibly stressful. I was very aware of it. You know, we're very fortunate. I moved from a position where I was traveling nonstop. In 2019, I flew 37 weeks on my job. And since then, since March 2020, I have not been out of this room. I've literally sat in front of this screen 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, doing this. But we're very lucky, lucky if I was trying to do that and had 2 kids or 3 kids under the age of 5 in a 2-bedroom flat, that would not be the same experience. Absolutely. So we've been privileged there. Let's bring you in, Lee Oughton. Sorry, did you want to come in, Danyetta? Or?
Yeah, I did. I actually wanted to touch on the question that you gave Alexandra a bit about why are we still here. And I think that part of the reason that we're still here is that we talk diversity, but we aren't very good about what it means to be inclusive. We don't really have we're still trying to figure out what that means. And so because we're coming from such a very, I would say, traditional way of looking at business and looking at, you can't hear your kids in the background, but that's now all thrown out the window. But as a mother, if I got on a call 10 years ago and my kids made noise in the background, that would be like sacrilege, right? They're like, that's so unprofessional. So, there's a lot that has to happen in terms of really understanding what it means to be inclusive and how everyone can be brought into the table, and to do so in a way that continues to support and uplift the mission and the goals of the company, right? Because they're not meant to be daycare centers, but at the same time, there has to be a way to balance the fact that, when you're bringing in women or you're bringing in, different backgrounds, like Nathan also talks about neurodiversity, there's accommodations that have to be made in order for that inclusive environment to filter. So I think really the last 30 years has been us kind of getting to that point of realizing that there's multiple perspectives on how that inclusion happens.
But again, to the point we'll come to, about change, for example, 30 years ago, if you were working for the Foreign Office as a woman and you got married, you had to resign. There was no position for a married woman in the Foreign Office. 50 years ago, if you were a teacher and you got married, then you had to resign. There was no position for a married teacher, and certainly not for a pregnant teacher. I mean, that was the idea that children should see a pregnant woman in the classroom. I mean, my God, downfall of civilization as we know it. in 20 years' time, they will look back on these as primitive times, just like every 30 years you look back in primitive times. So that change is part of what we do. We'll discuss that, I'm sure. Lee Oughton, great to see you, Lee. So Lee, you are part of the Kindness Games, Getting Security Done. You are very active in trying to create a platform that creates points of entry for people into the security industry, and you're very proactive about that. Tell us about what you're involved in and your perspectives on the discussion at hand.
Thank you so much, David. It's wonderful to be here, and I am honoured to speak on this panel. I'm just going to lead in and lean in with this and just say voices for all. What I'm trying to do with others is to create a platform where we can encourage and champion one another, just lifting each person up and giving that platform for people to share their voices. We don't want to suppress any conversation. In fact, my colleagues and a lot of friends and family want to take up all conversations. I want to bring the debate back into the room. At the end of the day, I think we're in a modern society where if you disagree with me, then we fall out, and I don't agree with that. You see, I want to understand your point of view on everything. I want to get to why was that flashpoint created? Where was the trigger behind that? Because I think if we lean in more with curiosity towards any subject, and why did someone respond in that manner when I said that certain word or that statement was there? Why did it get under their skin? And if we don't have the challenging conversations, the conversations sometimes that really are painful for you, you've really got to have them. And this is what I'm trying to do. And this is why you see me with the Kindness Games every single day. And look, not everybody loves the Kindness Games, which does sound strange. But all I'm trying to do and all we're trying to do with the Kindness Games and positivity, inspiration, empowerment is just try and change one life, or just try and lift someone up. And I hope I don't embarrass our good friend Louisa, but when I did a Kindness Games the other day for her and Danyetta, she was on a long haul flight and she just said, hey, that shout out you just given me has just put the pep back in my step and lifted me up. So that's what we're trying to do. And again, I don't want to clash on anyone when we separate or we segregate or we put different people in swim lanes. We want to bring all those swim lanes together. But at the end of the day, because of the society that we live in, labelization is out there and it will take a long time. And I'm not naive, I can't change it on my own. And that's why we're trying to bring together a community. And that's why we created the Kindness Games. And when I talk about the Kindness Games wasn't created for me. It was created for you, David. It was created for everybody within the industry, irrelevant of what demographic you come from. You're a young professional, you're a woman in security, you're a seasoned professional. We just want to give it out there to everybody so that they feel safe, they feel empowered, and they really want to show up. So that's all I've got for now, David.
Cheers, Lee. And great stuff. You're doing good work. I mean, you are an advocate, you are a champion, and the world needs advocates and champions. Neil Robertson, let's come to you, head of security for Unilever. Your experience is probably almost diametrically at the other end of the spectrum to most of ours. You're head of security of an organization that operates in 190 countries. That I love these numbers. You have 13 different brands, each of which has over €1 billion turnover a year. You have 51 billion in total. You have a global corporate, one of the top global corporate brands in the world. I mean, it is undoubtedly the case, I bet $100, that every single one of us has used one of your brands sometime today, almost certainly, soap, toothpaste, whatever it might be. Does that give you freedom, or does that support your ability to support these issues, or is it constricting? Is it empowering? Is it a mixture of both? How does that impact on you?
Well, listen, David, thanks also for the invite. And I was really keen to join because, I think this is such an important topic. And actually, I'm learning quite a lot already, particularly as we sort of cut around different environments, different perspectives already. So I'm making a whole host of notes. And Lee sort of caught it. It's about all this panoply of perspectives and engaging with people in lots of different ways and lots of different times of their life. And that is true diversity, and being able to embrace all that. Something that strikes me, I'm fortunate in that I work for I would argue, and of course we have our detractors, but I think it's a good corporation. It's got the right leadership intent. It's trying to drive along positively on many issues that impact us around the world. But that includes proper equality in the workplace as well, and equity in the workplace too. And I think it's made great strides at that. And we are bringing that story around many other parts of the world that still are very challenged by some of those aspects. And if we want to take sort of the next step in diversity, it might be around gender change. And there are some communities that are just not open for that discussion yet, and they're probably certainly not ready for it in their frontline security teams either. So, I mean, going back to that question, well, why are we still having this conversation? Well, I think we've only taken the first steps towards equity, and we're starting to learn what we need to be doing in some areas, but we've got a long way to go to apply that comprehensively and coherently, because there are still many societies and many sections of different communities that would work against or have ways of living that sort of work against some of the aspects that we're talking about. I mean, you said yourself, and not incorrectly, you might be criminalized in some societies for some of the conversation. I don't think we've been too controversial yet, but it wouldn't take too far to upset some individuals and their world of point of view. So actually, I think we're only learning collectively, and this discussion is just part of that learning. What does, and I think the comment was, we're talking about diversity. Danyetta, this was your comment, but we don't yet know how to be inclusive. So I think I'm suddenly realizing I'm still here learning how to be inclusive. I mean, I've got a wider set of comments that I would sort of like to make around allyship. But I'm just going to sort of pause at this point. And I want to come back to so I'll learn more from Lee about the kindness games. But he talked about, and again, I think it was comments about from Jav earlier on, about we've just not made this environment attractive for women. And it's women for all different types, and it's people of all different types, and it's men of all different types. The reason you get middle-aged, white, and this is one of my points in my sort of wider notes that I had, David, but let's be honest, corporate security leaders tend to be like me. They're I would suggest, well, definitely over 80% male.
I think you're going to say definitely overweight. Sorry, my mind was my mind was heading down a different path there.
that's a sensitive subject now. You touched on. But definitely, I'm going to go the whole hog. Definitely white. I just look at my Institute of Security Manager Association, which is all the big corporates, and there's not enough diversity in that organization. And so what? Because there are routes through that many of us have come through, whether it's military or policing and those very sort of traditional backgrounds. But one of the things that strikes me, and maybe this is in Lee was sort of talking about sort of opening up pathways, but it reminds me of career pathways, and there are many routes into security. And you talked yourself, David, earlier on about it's a very open society, and you can start on the front line of security and work your way into management. And maybe in that regard, the benchmarks are quite low, but the opportunities are really substantial. And a bit to Alexandra's points, her life has changed, but actually so can your security lifestyle, so can your security experience, and how you apply that. And so it really strikes me that actually we start off with very wide opportunities around security, and we should be building career pathways to attract people, to communicate to women differently, but to communicate to people of all backgrounds differently about the opportunities, because some people would view it as not a strong career option, not a professional career option. And I would challenge that anything that is anything but the case. I found it really challenging. I find myself right at the heart of the business agenda. And security leaders are seen as crisis leaders, but we're not the whole crisis team. Just to come back to another point people were making about very small crisis teams, and therefore, there's an over-reliance on that crisis team. And David and I first met when we were looking at, Unilever's crisis incident management program. And, we invoked something that we called our global incident management team for COVID. And the CEO led that on a routine basis with his sort of senior leadership team, of which I supported, and others, finance and other business leaders, etc. So we've got to broaden these things out. It's about how we engage with lots of different people. So I've got a range of different notes. There's about learning. I'm learning. I think there is about career pathways to attract and engage and communicate properly for people of all different points in their life, because our lifestyles change. I'm moving towards that empty nesting sort of stage now, and that gives me new opportunities, perhaps. So I'm going to stop there, David.
It's interesting stuff, and it just shows you both. I think listening to the conversation in general so far, it shows you just how diverse the conversation is, but also we have our own biases. We have very much seen this in terms of male-female issues. There's a lot of people say, no, it's classist. Middle class people have privileges, whether you're male or female, whereas working class people don't. You try and get into BBC or the National Theatre with the wrong accent. In the UK, we're very accent orientated. So I think it can be that. It can be, from, as Nathan's perspective, neurodiversity. It can be immigrants. For example, I was just listening to a podcast a couple of days ago. How many Black and Asian people change their names because they're just not getting picked up nowadays on the recruitment. If you're now automating recruitment and you're sending your CVs in, you want your name to be one that fits in smoothly into the system. I think there's a whole range of I think allyship is about empowerment and privilege and disempowerment. I think we're maybe bringing our own biases to the game in terms of limiting it in the way that we're bringing the conversation forward. Alexandra, you have now made the transition from home to mother. You're on the way to pick up your kids. Smooth. Back with us. Great stuff. Danyetta, you're in the car. This is just bad. This is bad. Danyetta, you're in the car going to pick up your kids. Alexandra, you're in the car, and all the males are sitting at home thinking, mate, can I have another cup of tea, please, darling? Perhaps there's something happening here that is a message for us all. Ken Smith, let's bring you in, Ken from Houston. Thoughts, please.
Hey, folks. Well, first of all, thank you to Danyetta and Louisa for the invite to be here today, and to everybody in the UK and US. I know it's a great conversation. There's so much to unpack. I'm not sure where to start, but I think I'll go back to somebody, I think it was you, David, who mentioned about folks working at the federal level or working in agencies as such or in the military. And I look back at my own career. And I think when it comes to women in security, there's no matter the field, and this is my opinion now, I think the last several decades and beyond that, it has been fraught with stereotypes and biases, and maybe stereotypes and biases that people didn't even know they had. I think that's a conversation to have as well. They weren't understanding they had these biases, these stereotypes, and discrimination towards women in the corporate security industry, as I know it, since its existence. And I know when I first started back in physical security in 2001, and this in Europe, and I just left the military, I think the industry was stereotyped to employ former military men such as myself, who came from an armed forces background and looking to secure a job in the private security sector, because that's what employers and recruiters possibly knew, and it was a safe bet for them. And now back then, I think companies and recruiters saw this as a positive, because veterans such as I, like, we came out of the military, we were structured, we were disciplined, and in most cases we're very well trained and had lots of international experience behind us, which was a lot of benefit to that. However, in the age we are today, and when I look back over my many years of corporate security, I think today I am of the opinion that a veteran and a male today coming out of the military does not qualify me to be a physical security or risk and crisis manager. There's no doubt about it, I bring tools and perspectives to the table, but am I qualified academically and culturally? I think not. And I think it has to change somewhere in the recruitment side of stuff, side of line of the companies and businesses as well, to actually go out there looking, or to make it, or to have the job specs worded and texted to actually attract more females into our industry. And that our recruiters are not just looking at, like, I still see it here on LinkedIn and across, for example, Texas and Houston. They will ask for a law enforcement background or a military background. And the first thing you think of is, well, that would be predominantly a male. It won't be a female, even though there are a lot of female veterans in the US, more so probably than elsewhere in the UK as well, but more so than other militaries across the world. So I think it comes back to starting again with the HR department, because I think security HR departments and interviewers were not shortlisting women for when it comes to interviews and for open spots. So women didn't sort of apply or didn't think it was for them. They didn't read anything in the text or in the scope of work that attracted them to that position. So we had to be able to attract more female professionals who are as good or better than I into this industry. And we have to put our hand out and pull them in, because if we don't, the female professionals out there who are very well qualified, they're not going to sit around waiting for the right text to show up or the right job to show up. They're going to go into another industry and another sector. And we see that. As Neela alluded to, it is a very white, male dominant sector, very much so. So I think as individuals or professionals ourselves, we have to make the first step. I think it's act local and sort of think global. We start with the local basis, doing what we can at our part, and then work outwards. Otherwise, things won't change. We can't be thinking big too far out. I think we got to bring it closer in and work outwards, and educate our HR departments, or educate our security departments, or the executives that, look, we need more females on board here. They are as qualified and as good as we are, if not better. So I think that's a big part of it. I think there's a huge HR problem there and recruitment problem to inviting women in security into our sector, and not just our sector, maybe many other sectors. And there's that stereotype that maybe females are better off working in finance or better off working in HR. That's a stereotype, and I think we've got to get away from that stereotype. And I think that has to start from the top down and the bottom up. We've all got a part to play there. It can't be just the top down. It can't just be the bottom up. But saying that, we talked about diversity and inclusion. I do agree that a lot of companies are trying to show that they're diverse, and we have all different colors and races at the table. But I come back to that analogy again that I think I mentioned the other day. It's a bit like inviting folks to a dance. You can invite as many people as you want to a dance of all different colors, but if you don't invite them out to dance, you're not really including them. All you're doing is creating a facade of diversity and not inclusion. So they don't feel belong, they're just there. That is it. We need to invite whoever it is, and I'm saying male and female, to the table so we can all talk and discuss these topics, just as we're doing here at this round table. I think we all have a part to play. We all have a voice, even though there are things we will say sometimes we may not all agree on. But the thing is, like Lee mentioned, we've got to have that conversation, that discussion, and go away being friends and come back and discuss it again, and not judge each other, but listen to our perspectives. So a lot there, a lot to unpack, so I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Ken, as always. Right, finally, let's bring Jav Malik in. Jav, if you want to open up your camera, that'd be lovely. Let's bring you in. Jav, you are a senior risk manager, global risk manager at ActionAid, a global NGO. You're also the chair of INSSA, the International NGO Safety and Security Association, which is a fantastic organization. And you are clearly a woman. I think I'm allowed to say that. How are you doing? I mean, in that world, how are you negotiating with the world? in that sense.
Thanks, David. That's very interesting. Yes, I do identify as a woman, she, her, cisgender woman. But I think I would like to go back to the question that you asked in the beginning as to how we're finding this conversation and why are we still talking about it. First of all, I do think it's a good thing that we're talking about it. Because mostly, you know, how the world goes from situation to situation, something goes, you know, on top of our priority, and then it just falls right through, and then something else becomes a priority. But inclusivity and diversity, they have remained a priority. And now that, I mean, we've started to talk more about it. It has become more relevant today. And hence, we see change happening. At some places, the change is only visual, or let's say optical. We can see that, where, you know, it's kind of like a tick box exercise because people want to appear, like colleagues have also mentioned, they want to appear diverse and inclusive. But on the other hand, there are some genuine efforts, and I would like to give a big shout out to our male allies in this space today, and obviously to ISRM for organizing this and from bringing us all together. So when I actually started in security, I took it as a challenge because I come from Pakistan. You know, had a very sheltered life, as, you know, many urban middle-class women would in a country like Pakistan. But I wanted to do something more, something different. I was a communications person, a TV person, and a journalist. So my family was very concerned about my journalism, because for journalism, I needed to go out and, you know, meet different types of characters to get the story. But then I also needed to be very safe. So that's how my mind started to work on security side, and I started to make my own security strategies. When I joined ActionAid, I offered, and this was something I offered actually, there was no post of security, but I offered to do security as part of my role. And then from there on, it was a journey, and I became the global security lead for the Federation. We work in 45 countries. We work with civil society actors. We work with activists. So the model of security, or the security strategies that we utilize, are not the typical or traditional security strategies, because they're very much linked to, let's say, everyday maneuvers. It's based on, you know, counter surveillance for most part. And it is very much designed for and designed by non-security people. So that is the nuance about the basic kind of security that we do in ActionAid. However, we do the traditional stuff as well, which all INGOs do. So of course, that's one stream of my work, but most of it is about creativity, you know, finding your solutions. By the way, we work in low tech or no tech security solutions, because the activists, where they work in like a Ugandan village, we cannot ask them to be holding, you know, or carrying gadgets, because those gadgets will then make them so visible. So it is really covert, if you know what I'm saying. So it's a really different type of security, which I think in many, like, it's more like guerrilla type of security, if I can call it that. And so anyway, we were talking about male mentors and people, allies and supporters. Of course, in my career, all throughout, I've had, most of the people that have supported me have been men, and not all for good reasons. So some men wanted to promote me, a non-threatening, you know, 5'2" tall, you know, I'm like really short and non-threatening, and, you know, okay, what does she know? You know, that kind of mentality. Little did they know, by the way. So, and I proved them wrong. But they were like, okay, let's promote this girl. She won't be a threat. She won't be competing for our job. So that was one thing. The other one was, well, let's promote her, because then she'll really be executing what we will. That whole crowd of so-called mentors, there were also people that trusted the capability and the lived experiences that I brought. So there was all different types of mentors. And of course, now I'm wise enough to actually sift through the different types of support that I receive from different people. Lastly, I think in conclusion, I would say, we talk about anti-racism in organizations, and we do talk about anti-sexism. But many of our board members, or let's say the trustees or the directors, it's really, it's not always that they understand what they're talking about. So it is up to individuals, such as all of us here in this room, to have an audience with them and sometimes challenge them. Well, you're using these words. Do you even mean what, do you even understand what they mean? And what are the practical steps that you're going to take in order to stay true to your strategy? And I think those are the pointed questions that put them back on track. And I do that all the time. And I'm sure my colleagues in this space also do that. I think that's about it. Look, I wasn't really prepared, but thank you so much for giving me the opportunity, David. It's always lovely to be part of your insightful conversations and your events. So thanks.
And back at you, Jeff. Always great to have you here. You always bring value.